When your emotions are out of control, silence becomes your greatest weapon. In the heat of the moment, when your heart is racing, your breathing becomes shallow, and your thoughts are scattered, the urge to speak can be overwhelming. You want to defend yourself, prove a point, or lash out to release the pressure building inside you. But that's exactly when words become dangerous, when they're not guided by reason, but hijacked by emotion. Anger, frustration, jealousy, and hurt. These are powerful forces, and when they take control, they blur your judgment. You say things you don't mean, make promises you can't keep, and hurt people you never intended to wound. Words spoken in rage are arrows you can't retrieve once they're released. The truth is, emotions aren't permanent, they pass like storms, but the consequences of what you say in the middle of the storm can last a lifetime. When you're emotional, you don't see clearly. You interpret others' words through a distorted lens, you assume bad intentions, and you respond not with clarity, but with impulse. That's why silence is strength. It gives you space, space to think, space to breathe, space to return to yourself. Silence is not suppression, it's strategy. It's choosing not to react, but to reflect. It's recognizing that just because you feel something deeply, doesn't mean you need to act on it immediately. Think about the relationships that matter to you. How many times have things gone wrong, simply because someone said something in the heat of the moment? A careless insult, a harsh judgment, a sarcastic remark, all fueled by temporary emotion, but carrying permanent damage. Silence in these moments is not avoidance, it's protection. It protects your integrity, your relationships, and your peace of mind. It allows you to feel the emotion without becoming enslaved by it. Because emotional maturity doesn't mean you never get angry or upset, it means you know when not to speak from that place. Many people confuse silence with weakness, but the one who can hold their tongue when everything in them wants to explode, that person has power, that person is in control, that person commands respect. Speaking quickly often feels satisfying in the short term, it feels like release, but silence builds character. It forces you to carry the weight of your emotions, without throwing them on others. It's not easy, but it's necessary, because every word you speak under emotional pressure is a seed, and depending on the soil you're in, that seed will either grow into regret or resilience. Sometimes the silence you keep when emotional is what allows others to reveal themselves. When you don't interrupt, when you don't defend, when you don't react, people show you who they are. Silence gives you the upper hand, because it turns the spotlight away from your reaction and toward their behavior. It lets you watch instead of escalate. It helps you listen, not just to what others are saying, but to what your inner voice is trying to tell you. There's always a deeper message beneath strong emotion. Maybe it's a need for validation, a fear of abandonment, or an unresolved wound from the past. But you can't hear that message if you're too busy talking. Silence allows that message to surface. Every moment you stay silent in emotional chaos, you reclaim a part of your power. You become someone who isn't controlled by external chaos or internal storms. You build the muscle of restraint. You learn to act from intention, not impulse. And in a world that moves too fast, reacts too quickly, and speaks without thinking, your silence becomes rare, valuable, and wise. When someone tries to provoke you, the greatest display of strength is not retaliation, but restraint. Provocation is a test of your character, your emotional intelligence, and your sense of self. People who provoke you are often seeking a reaction, not a resolution. They want to control the energy of the moment by pushing your buttons, manipulating your emotions, and dragging you into a game you never agreed to play. But the moment you react, you hand over your power, you confirm their control, you become a puppet to their intention, and in doing so you lose clarity, dignity, and peace. Silence in the face of provocation is not weakness, it's a strategy of the wise. It's the realization that not every comment deserves your attention, not every insult deserves a reply, and not every battle is worth fighting. There are people who thrive on chaos. They provoke not because they seek truth, but because they crave control. They want to see if they can shake you, make you angry, make you stumble. They test you to see what lives beneath your surface, and how you respond, or don't, tells them everything. Silence in these moments is a signal. It communicates that you are not emotionally available for their drama. It says you've chosen peace over pride, power over impulse. Most importantly, it allows you to stay connected to your higher self, the part of you that is not reactive, not defensive, not insecure, The part of you that doesn't need to win the argument, to win the moment. Because real power doesn't need to shout, real confidence doesn't need to prove, and real maturity knows that some battles are won by walking away. Every time you choose silence when someone tries to provoke you, you practice self-mastery. You learn to observe your rising emotions, without being ruled by them. You become the kind of person who leads the energy of a room, instead of absorbing it. You don't mirror the chaos, you neutralize it. And that's rare. Most people live in reaction mode. They hear something offensive, and immediately fire back. They feel challenged and instantly retaliate. But what if you did the opposite? What if you paused, held your ground, and responded not with words, but with nothing? That silence is louder than any argument. It's unsettling to those who seek conflict. They expect escalation, not elevation, and when you refuse to engage, they're left alone with their chaos. That's when their own words start echoing in the empty space. That's when their intent becomes visible, not just to you but to others watching. Silence exposes the manipulator. It shows the aggressor for who they are, while preserving your dignity in the process. There is also a deeper kind of wisdom that silence offers in moments of provocation. It gives you time to assess the situation, understand the motive, and choose your next move with clarity. Because not every provocation needs to be addressed. Some deserve silence, some require distance, and others demand boundaries. But none of them benefit from impulsive reaction. Silence creates a gap between stimulus and response, and in that gap is your freedom. Freedom to choose how you will respond, when you will respond, and whether a response is even necessary. Sometimes staying silent when provoked is about protecting your energy, not because you're afraid to speak, but because you value your peace too much to give it away. You realize that your time, attention, and words are sacred, and not everyone deserves access to them. Provocation loses its power when it meets a person who cannot be shaken by it. You become untriggerable, untouchable, unshaken, not because you're numb, but because you've mastered the art of choosing silence over self-sabotage. When you're still processing your thoughts, silence becomes a space for clarity. In a world that rewards quick responses and fast opinions, taking a moment to pause can feel like you're falling behind. But it's in that pause that true wisdom is formed. When your thoughts are swirling, scattered, and incomplete, speaking too soon often results in confusion, regret, or misunderstanding. You speak before the truth inside you has fully formed. You say something halfway right and halfway wrong, and in doing so you betray your own deeper knowing. Silence gives you the time to let your thoughts settle, like sediment in water, so that you can see clearly again. Most people are uncomfortable with silence. They rush to fill it with noise, to avoid the discomfort of not knowing. But growth often happens in that discomfort. It's in the moments where you don't yet have an answer, when your emotions and logic haven't yet aligned, that silence becomes your ally. Processing your thoughts is not a sign of indecision, it's a sign of depth. It means you care about speaking truth, not just reacting. It means you're aware of the weight your words carry, and you don't throw them carelessly into the world. When you're still processing, your mind is sorting through layers of information. What happened, how it made you feel, what it means, and what's the best response. To interrupt that process by rushing into speech is like pulling bread out of the oven before it's fully baked. It looks ready on the outside, but the inside is raw and unformed. The same goes for your ideas. They need silence to develop, to deepen, to become something worth sharing. Speaking too soon often leads to backtracking, apologizing, or over-explaining, but silence allows you to move forward with confidence. Once you've truly understood what you need to say, there's also a kind of humility in choosing silence while you're processing. It means you're willing to admit, even if only to yourself, that you don't have it all figured out yet, and that's okay. In fact, it's more than okay, it's essential. Rushing to speak just to appear knowledgeable or composed can often reveal the opposite. But taking your time, being thoughtful, and honoring the complexity of your thoughts shows maturity. It shows that you understand not everything needs an immediate answer. Not every question demands a rushed reply. Silence also protects your relationships when you're still figuring things out. How many times have arguments escalated simply because someone responded too quickly, without thinking, without understanding, without fully hearing what was being said? A silent pause can prevent misunderstandings from becoming conflicts. It can give both parties the room to breathe and reconsider. It can allow love, respect, and reason to enter the space before words do. And in that space, healing can begin. insight can emerge, and resolution can be found. Even in professional settings, silence while processing is a sign of strength, not weakness. It shows that you are intentional, that you don't speak just to be heard, but to contribute something meaningful. It shows that you're not driven by ego, but by integrity. Leaders who pause before responding are often the ones who inspire the most trust, because people can sense when words are coming from a place of clarity versus confusion. They know when a response has been processed, considered, and crafted with care. There is power in sitting with your thoughts, even if they're messy, uncomfortable, or uncertain. Silence gives them the room they need to evolve. It allows the noise of the world to fade just long enough for your inner wisdom to speak. And when it does, you'll know that your words are no longer just reactions, they're reflections of a deeper truth you took the time to understand. When others are gossiping or slandering, choosing silence is one of the most powerful and courageous decisions you can make. It can be tempting to join in, to add your voice to the crowd, especially when it feels like everyone else is doing it. There's a certain comfort in being part of a group, in sharing secrets, or criticizing someone who isn't present, but that kind of comfort is deceptive. It pulls you into a false sense of belonging that's built on tearing others down, and deep down, you know it doesn't feel right. You know that the same group that gossips with you today can easily gossip about you tomorrow. That's the nature of people who build their connections on negativity. They aren't loyal to people, they're loyal to drama. Silence in these moments is not about weakness or fear. It's about integrity. It's about knowing who you are, and refusing to compromise that just to feel included. It's about understanding that your words carry weight, and using them to harm others, especially when they're not present to defend themselves, says more about your character than theirs. Staying silent when gossip or slander arises is a quiet declaration of your values. It says that you stand for something higher than momentary amusement or shared discontent. It means you understand that respect doesn't end when someone leaves the room. There's also a level of self-respect that comes with staying silent. When you refuse to participate in gossip, you protect your energy from being entangled in negativity. You keep your mind clear, your conscience clean, and your reputation intact. Because people may not always remember exactly what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel, and whether or not they felt safe around you. If someone trusts you enough to be themselves in your presence, part of that trust comes from believing that you won't turn around and betray them the moment they're gone. Silence builds that trust. It sends the message that your loyalty isn't situational, it's principled. Gossip and slander are often symptoms of deeper issues: insecurity, envy, bitterness. These emotions fester inside people who haven't dealt with their own pain. So instead of healing, they deflect. Instead of building themselves up, they try to bring others down. But that's not your path. That's not your responsibility to carry. And when you stay silent, you remove yourself from the emotional chaos. You refuse to take part in the cycle. You choose to be different. Silence also gives you the power to observe. When you're not adding fuel to the fire, you can see who is really driving the conversation. You can see who needs validation through negativity, who thrives on tearing others down, and who masks their pain through judgment. This awareness allows you to make better decisions about who you allow into your life, who you confide in, and who truly shares your values. Because the way people talk about others in their absence is often the most honest reflection of who they are. In moments of gossip, your silence becomes a filter. It filters out the noise, the drama, the manipulation, and lets you hold on to it. Gives you the chance to rise above, without being self-righteous or confrontational. You don't have to lecture anyone. You don't have to shame anyone. Your silence is enough. It speaks volumes. It sets a boundary, without needing a speech. And those who are paying attention will notice. They'll see your strength. They'll see that your respect is not selective. They'll recognize that you are someone who can be trusted, someone who doesn't need to step on others to feel tall, someone who has the courage to be quiet when it's easier to join the noise. When speaking would escalate the situation, silence becomes a tool of mastery. There are moments in life when words don't heal, they ignite. When tension is already high, when emotions are raw, and when misunderstandings are stacked on top of each other like fragile glass, one wrong word can shatter everything. It's in these moments that silence isn't avoidance, it's intervention. It's the decision to not throw gasoline on a fire that's already burning. Not because you're scared, but because you're wise enough to understand that some fighters don't need to be fought, they need to be starved. In arguments, especially with people you care about, the urge to win can overpower the intention to understand. You start speaking not to resolve, but to dominate. to prove you're right, to defend your pride, to punish the other person for how they made you feel. But that's when things spiral. One sentence leads to another, one accusation leads to a deeper wound, and suddenly what started as a disagreement becomes a battlefield of blame, resentment, and regret. Silence in that moment can stop the spiral. It can break the chain of escalation. It can bring a moment of stillness, where there was only noise. Sometimes silence is the only thing that keeps love alive. It holds space for reflection, instead of retaliation. It allows both people to breathe, to think, to reconnect with the real issue, rather than getting lost in emotional warfare. It gives you the chance to ask yourself, is what I'm about to say going to bring us closer, or drive us further apart? Am I reacting from ego, or responding from wisdom? Silence gives you time to make that distinction, and often that small pause is the difference between conflict and connection. There is also a certain strength in choosing not to respond to hostility with more hostility. When someone raises their voice, insults you, or throws blame your way, the natural instinct is to defend yourself or fight back. But if you do, you become part of the chaos. You validate their aggression by meeting it with your own. But when you choose silence, when you stay grounded and calm, you refuse to participate in the emotional volatility. You become the stillness in the storm, and that stillness has power. It often disarms the aggressor, because they were expecting resistance, not restraint. In high-stakes situations, at work, in relationships, or in public conflicts, silence also gives you control over the narrative. When you speak impulsively, you give others ammunition. They can twist your words, use them against you, or interpret them through their own biases. But silence cannot be misquoted. It cannot be distorted. It protects you from being misunderstood, misrepresented, or manipulated. It gives you time to choose the right words, if words are even needed at all. People often mistake silence for submission. But the reality is, silence can be the loudest response. It communicates maturity, discipline, and emotional intelligence. It says, I will not lower myself to this level. I will not let this moment define me. I will not lose control just because someone else already has. It sets a boundary without confrontation. It draws a line without a fight. And sometimes, that's more powerful than any argument you could make. The discipline to stay silent when a situation is about to explode is a reflection of how deeply you've worked on yourself. It shows you've learned that not every attack deserves a counterattack, not every insult needs an answer, and not every conflict has to end with a winner and a loser. Silence preserves the dignity of the moment. It allows you to walk away with your integrity intact, knowing you didn't add to the chaos, knowing you stayed aligned with your higher self. When you're in the presence of someone who doesn't value your voice, your silence becomes your greatest expression of self-respect. There are moments in life when speaking isn't just useless, it's degrading. You try to explain yourself, to clarify your feelings, to be honest and open with someone, and they respond with dismissal, mockery, or indifference. In these moments, continuing to speak is like offering a gift to someone who's already thrown it on the ground. It's painful, it's humiliating, and worst of all, it chips away at your sense of worth. But choosing silence is not surrender, it's self-preservation. It's the moment you reclaim your dignity, and decide that your voice is too precious to be wasted on someone who refuses to listen. Some people don't seek understanding, they seek dominance. They don't want dialogue, they want control. They twist your words, invalidate your emotions, and pretend not to hear your truth. And the more you try to explode, the more you shrink, the more exhausted you become. That's when silence steps in, not as a retreat, but as a stand for your value, a stand for your peace. Because silence in this context isn't passive, it's powerful. It communicates clearly. I will not keep speaking to prove my worth. I will not pour my truth into a container that refuses to hold it. There is a deep wisdom in knowing when someone has stopped deserving your words. It takes awareness to recognize that you've said enough, that your point has been made, that continuing to speak would only turn truth into noise. It's not about giving up. It's about letting go of the illusion that you can change someone who is committed to misunderstanding. Silence then becomes a boundary, a clear and firm line that says, if you cannot respect what I'm saying, you no longer get to hear my voice. In relationships, romantic, familial, professional, this kind of silence is transparent. It shifts the energy from proving to protecting. It allows you to step back and evaluate whether your presence is being appreciated or exploited. And often, in the silence, you find answers that words would only cloud. You begin to see more clearly the imbalance, the manipulation, or the emotional neglect. And with that clarity comes the strength to either demand better or walk away altogether. This kind of silence is also a form of healing. when your voice has been ignored or attacked, when your opinions have been dismissed, when your emotions have been invalidated, the noise around you becomes toxic. Speaking in that environment becomes painful, but silence allows you to breathe again. It allows you to stop explaining and start listening to yourself. It gives you space to reconnect with your own truth, to validate your own emotions, to hear your own needs, without interruption. There's also something profoundly unsettling to others, when someone who once spoke freely, suddenly becomes silent. It shifts the power dynamic. It sends a message. I am no longer engaging on your terms. I no longer need your validation to believe in my worth. And that shift often forces others to confront their behavior in a way words never could, because silence removes the distraction of argument and leaves them alone with the weight of their actions. To choose silence in the face of disregard is not easy. It requires restraint, courage, and a deep sense of inner security. But it's a choice that protects your soul. It keeps you from lowering yourself to someone else's level. It allows you to maintain your grace, your self-respect, and your emotional clarity. And over time, it teaches you that not every space deserves your voice, not every you deserves your words, and not every person deserves access to your inner world.